Hello everybody, I hope you're all well. So I know, I always start out videos at the moment with apologising for being on a hiatus, but I do genuinely have a really good reason as for why I was gone. As you guys can tell by the new setting, I've moved into my own little flat. It's so cute, and I'm not going to go on because people always complain that my intros are too long, but I do just want to say thank you to anyone who's supported my channel, because without you guys I wouldn't have been able to even move and have this nice lovely little background. Please ignore the exposed shelf. If you say anything about the exposed shelf, then I will block you. Obviously I was getting really stressed with moving and everything. I had so much to do, but I was like, you know what, I'm still gonna make a YouTube video in between this. I can do this. Then I got really sick. I ended up in the hospital with a kidney infection and I was unwell for nearly 2 weeks. It was honestly, like, I'm laughing about it now, but it was actually quite traumatic. But I'm back, I'm alive, and I'm fine, and I'm ready to make some good content. So today's video I'm going to be talking all about the phenomenon of pick-me boys and nice guy syndrome. I am not the first person to make a video about pick-me boys. My friend Tara Mooney made a really good video about pick-me boys, which I will link down below. This video has been on my list for a really long time, at least since I made my pick-me girls video, which was nearly over a year ago. But for some reason, I just kept pushing it back. I just kept finding videos that I'd rather do until I watched this year's Love Island. If you guys haven't watched Love Island before, you're missing out on a big part of British culture, babes. I watched the entirety of this year's Love Island, and one contestant in particular, Hugo Hammond, absolutely fascinated me, and I felt like he really perfectly encapsulated that pick-me boy / nice guy syndrome mentality.
Done.
So I thought I would talk about that today and use Hugo almost as a little case study. If some of you guys aren't into reality TV like I am, Love Island is a British reality show which has loads of different versions in different countries. Loads of single people are put into a villa and they couple up. New people join the villa, people get dumped, and the winning couple wins a cash prize of £50,000. Obviously the show has a lot of flaws. There's obviously problems with diversity and poor representation, specifically how they treat their black female contestants. I will link a few videos down below which I've watched about that recently. Also a lack of aftercare, psychological aftercare, giving poor financial advice or no financial advice to islanders. But today I'm going to focus on one specific contestant trope which Love Island seems to follow every year. If you guys don't watch the show, Love Island often follows sort of the same casting formula. So when it comes to casting tropes, there's usually the funny Jack the Lad type, there's sort of the dumb blonde Essex girl, there's also someone who either has a famous relative or used to be famous themselves, my personal favourite being Marcel from season 3.
Like I used to be in a band, innit? Like,
Yeah.
do you remember the Blazing Squad?
Oh my days, no way. You heard of Blazing Squad?
I heard what's Blazing Squad.
And there is the nice guy trope, which I will be discussing today. Dr. Alex from season 4, Nas from Winter Love Island, and most recently Hugo from this year's Love Island. They aren't a typical Love Island contestant. They don't usually have like loads of girls on the go. They are still good looking, but they have very sort of pure and genuine intentions and go on the show to find love. They just seem to have a little bit of a tricky time doing so. A lot of the girls usually say that they're too nice, and usually audiences end up really rooting for these contestants because they seem like genuinely nice guys who are just a little bit down on their luck. Nas from Winter Love Island ended up making a connection with someone in Casa Amor, and I'm pretty sure they're still together. Dr. Alex ended up coupling up with Alexandra for a while, and even though he ended up sucking her off, oh my god, he didn't end up he what? Even though he ended up sacking her off, correction, gosh, and things went a little bit sour, he ended up still remaining a fairly well-liked contestant. But Hugo is just a completely different story, and I think it's because people could really see through that pick-me boy, nice guy act, I guess. So that's what I'm going to be talking about in today's video, and I did intend on only talking about nice guys and pick-me's, but I ended up reading this book to research. It is Men Who Hate Women by Laura Bates, and it's all about all sorts of misogyny. That's totally not depressing at all. And I ended up learning a lot about the incel movement from this book and how almost casual forms of misogyny, like being a pick-me, guy with nice guy syndrome, these types of people can be really susceptible to incel radicalization and sort of the pipeline from casual misogyny to more extreme misogyny. So I'm going to have a little chat about incels as well because I find it really interesting, and I'm sure you guys will find it interesting as well. Pick-me boys / nice guy syndrome are very similar, but they do have differences. So I've got some definitions from my favorite website ever, Urban Dictionary, so you guys can sort of get an idea of what I'm talking about and sort of grasp the differences. The first definition I found for a pick-me boy is a guy who uses self-deprecation in a manipulative way so a girl will date him. They'll say bad things about themselves to try and get the girl to oppose what they've said. And another definition I found of pick-me boy on Urban Dictionary, a guy who tries to get girls by saying things like, I'm too nice, girls don't like nice guys like me, I'm so ugly, and others of the sort. They claim to be different and how nobody likes them or how ugly they are as a flirty move to try and kind of force a girl to have to say, you're not ugly, just so they can take it and say, so you think I'm hot? I've been meaning to tell you that I like you. We'll also call you names if you reject them after that line. More of the story, pick-me guys are low-key just as annoying as pick-me girls and usually catch feelings really fast. And nice guy, capitalized, is defined on Urban Dictionary as not to be confused with a nice guy, that is a male that is nice. When used as a noun instead of an adjective, nice guy refers to people, men or women, who believe basic social expectations are currency for sex. Now, one thing which I don't really agree with this definition is that a nice guy can be a man or a woman. Of course, there are women out there who do believe that social expectations are a currency for sex, but nice guy syndrome is rooted in so much misogyny that it is far more common in men. And nice guy syndrome is defined on Urban Dictionary as a condition where a guy feels he's entitled to dating a girl simply because he has been her friend and let her cry on her shoulder about the jerks. When she is not attracted to him, he chooses to blame it on the fact that he has been a nice guy and she only wants to date jerks. Really, not the mentality of a guy who is actually nice, because one should not be kind in the hopes of getting a girl and simply be kind for the sake of being kind. So as you guys can see, even though they are very similar, they do slightly differ. And I think the reason why I find this topic so interesting is because pick-me boys are the male equivalent to pick-me girls. And I have made a video about pick-me girls on my channel before, so feel free to check that out. But the whole thing with pick-me girls is that it's all rooted in very deep set internalized misogyny. But being a pick-me boy is not rooted in internalized misandry. It's also rooted in misogyny. As you guys can see, women are really pulling the short straw when it comes to this one. But before I get into that, I want to discuss Hugo from Love Island and his story and how I think that him on Love Island was just the perfect portrayal of a bit of a pick-me or a guy with nice guy syndrome. And just before I do explain Hugo's story, I do just want to quickly disclaim that I'm not saying 100% that Hugo himself is a pick-me boy or has nice guy syndrome. I'm saying that the way he was portrayed on Love Island was very much pick-me boy / nice guy syndrome. I don't think you can really get a good grasp on someone's character from a show like Love Island because it is just such an unnatural setting. You have no no communication with the outside world. You have no way of entertaining yourself either. You don't even know what the bloody time is. I mean, if anything, it's very close to infringing on human rights. So I completely understand why people act very out of character on that show, because the setting is just extremely unnatural. So Hugo was an original cast member of this year's Love Island. He definitely isn't bad looking, but he doesn't necessarily fit sort of the typical type of guy that goes on Love Island. He's a teacher and is all round a fairly nice guy. And in the first couple of weeks, no girls are interested in him. A lot of the girls say that he's too nice and he's just having a little bit of bad luck with it. And Hugo made it very, very clear that he does not like fake girls.
Fake, you don't like.
Fake, yeah. Personality and looks.
In personality and in looks, which did cause a lot of the girls to kick off, because obviously a lot of the girls on Love Island have had boob implants and lip filler, and it ended up leading to a really uncomfortable moment where Faye is schooling Hugo on how hard her life was because she had to get boob implants when she turned 18, when Hugo grew up disabled. And Hugo was also coupled up with Chloe in a friendship couple before she decided to romantically couple up with Toby. This is an important detail, so make sure you remember this. So anyways, after a real dry spell in the villa, Sharon, who was originally coupled up with Hugo, sticks it on him and says that she's interested in exploring things further, and he completely shuts her down. And then AJ joins the villa, also very much lays it on thick with him, and he also isn't interested in her. And even though you're a little bit like, this is weird because they're both really pretty girls, you do also think, oh, well, you know, he did specify that he doesn't like fake girls, so maybe it's just not his type. Enter Grace. Guys, I call her Grace for the entire video and her name's Georgia. I'm so sorry, Georgia, if you're watching this video. I highly doubt it, but if you are, I'm so sorry. I don't know where I got Grace from, but anyways, I say Grace for the whole video, but her name's actually Georgia. Who is probably the most natural girl next door type contestant you can get. And people immediately think that she is perfect for Hugo. Hugo has been harping on and on and on about how he doesn't like fake girls, and she sticks it on him. She's really interested in him. And Hugo doesn't even give her the time of day. I've actually never seen one person so disinterested in someone. And during this time that Grace is sticking it on Hugo, Chloe and Toby have fallen out because Toby wants to crack on and get to know Abby, and Chloe isn't happy about that. I'm really sorry if you didn't watch the show and this is really confusing. I'm trying to make this as clear and concise as possible. So, drama, there's a recoupling, and all of the guys have to choose a girl to recouple with, and the girl that is left single is dumped from the island. So as you can tell, it's high stakes, and Toby, who was previously romantically coupled up with Chloe, chooses to recouple with Abby. Hugo is the last boy who chooses who to couple up with, and he has to decide between Chloe, his good friend who he was coupled up with in a friendship couple for a while, or Grace, supernatural girl next door who's been laying it on thick with him and according to him is his type, and he chooses Chloe. He makes a whole song and dance with it and basically tries to make himself a hero in this situation. He makes a huge speech in front of everyone, throws Toby, who is his friend, under the bus and says the way that Toby has treated Chloe is not okay, and Hugo also says that he sees a future with him and Chloe. And during this oh so heroic speech, he doesn't say a single word to or about Grace and leaves her standing in the cold all on her own, not even a tiny little acknowledgement or apology. And this is when it all started clicking for me. Hugo's a pick me. Pick me. Choose me. love me. Instead of pulling Toby to the side and telling him that the way he's treating Chloe isn't okay, or even just choosing to acknowledge Grace's existence, he chooses to throw his friend under the bus and left a girl who was actually romantically interested in him out to dry, all because he wanted to impress Chloe, who doesn't even like him back. And you can tell that he just thought of himself as a hero in this situation, and you can tell that he thought of himself as a nice guy, and that's just not a nice thing to do, to potentially hurt two people just to impress a girl who friend-zoned you 2 weeks ago. And after this dramatic recoupling, Grace is sent home. Toby and Hugo are no longer friends, and Hugo ends up pulling Chloe to the side and sticking it on her, but in this really subtle way where he was kind of moving to her, but not really, but he was like, oh, but like, wouldn't it be crazy if we kissed? And he decides to stick it on her right after she's gone through all this shit with Toby, so she's probably feeling a little bit emotionally vulnerable, which to be fair is where pick-me boys really thrive, telling her that she needs a nice guy like him. And luckily she still immediately shut him down, but that didn't stop him from trying to kiss her when they got saved in a public vote, which was just so unbelievably uncomfortable to watch. And I feel like this was really the peak of Hugo's pick-me behavior. His pick-me behavior started to stagnate from there. He ended up coupling up with Amy from Casa Amor, and then things fizzled and he wasn't really making an effort with her, and then they got kicked out after a public vote, and then he said that his journey to find love was tragic right in front of her.
Tragic is probably the word for it.
And then they got into a fight in Love Island After Sun where he accused her of using him as a green card to the main villa, which, to be fair, that is probably true. And that is the story of Hugo from Love Island. The reason why I decided to tell that was because isn't that just the perfect example of someone who is being a massive pick-me? But anyways, enough Love Island talk for this video, babes. I now want to explore pick-me boys and nice guy syndrome a little bit further. It's all well and good discussing pick-me boys and nice guy syndrome and having a little giggle at Hugo from Love Island, but I do want to explore it a little bit deeper and explore why nice guys even exist in the first place. And I'm going to group pick-me boys and nice guys together for the sake of convenience. I know that they are slightly different, but they are born out of the same thing, which is misogyny, obviously. So the first thought which was running through my head as I was researching this video was, is this a dating tactic or is it just a genuine character flaw? And honestly, I think it's a bit of both. I definitely think that there are men out there who use this nice guy act as a dating tactic because they know that women will feel sorry for them. They know that women may develop a little bit of a soft spot for them. There definitely is a larger subsection of men where this is a genuine character flaw and they don't think that they're doing anything wrong and they completely victimize themselves and are extremely misogynistic without even realizing. And whether being a pick-me boy slash nice guy is actually a successful dating tactic is definitely up for debate. I think it really depends who you use it on. I think this technique only really works on young girls and women who don't have a lot of experience in dating because I think that they don't really have a reason to not trust men. And I also think when you're young, at least in my experience anyway, I was a lot less versed and informed about misogyny, especially that brand of misogynistic men who don't realize that they're misogynistic. I really did not know that men like that existed when I was younger. I used to think if men were misogynistic, they just vocally hated women and that was that. And I think that the pick-me boy slash nice guy act just doesn't work on women who have a lot of dating experience because we are taught and we learn from experiences that guys like that are huge red flags and you need to run the other way. And a lot of these pick-me's slash nice guys end up spiraling deeper and deeper into their pick-me slash nice guy persona because they are constantly experiencing rejection over and over again because a lot of women see these men as red flags and will run the other way. And what do these men do? They blame the women, of course. These men fail to see the common denominator in all of their failed relationships, which is themselves. Like, one thing which really baffles me is that if you're having to convince women that you're a nice guy, maybe you're not that much of a nice guy. And I think that these types of men failing to be self-critical reflects the wider issue of men being terrible at introspection. And I find this especially common amongst white men. And I think that it's a reason why a majority of pick-me boys and nice guys tend to be white men, and especially why the incel movement is dominated by white men. White men don't need to think about how much they're coming across as non-white men do, as much as women do, or as much as non-white women do. Just a small example. As a woman, you really need to think about how you're coming across to men, because if you're being too nice and too friendly, you're seen as a flirt or leading them on, which can lead to a violent situation. And if you're standoffish or rude, you can be seen as a bitch, which can also lead to a violent situation. This is a daily problem which women have to deal with, and especially women of color, who are far more likely to be victims of violence at the hands of men. And I feel like this isn't really a problem which white men have to deal with every single day, which leads to them having a real lack of introspection and not being self-critical enough, and can lead to some very severe cases of nice guy syndrome. But anyways, the main reason why nice guy syndrome / pick me boys exist is because of misogyny. And it's the type of misogyny which runs so deep that a majority of these men do not think that they're misogynistic or realize that they're misogynistic. These men think that women owe them sex or romantic relationships. They don't understand the concept of platonic friendships between men or women because they only value women for sex. Therefore, a platonic relationship has no use to them. You can usually spot a guy with nice guy syndrome from a mile off because they usually have no female friends. And by the way, ladies, quick relationship advice: if a man has no female friends, that is a red flag, because it probably means that they don't like hanging out with women outside of having sex with them. Also, another reason why I think pick me boys / nice guys exist is because I don't think that these men have an understanding of romantic relationships. Well, clearly they've never been in one before. They think that being nice is enough to warrant them a romantic relationship, which you can't really blame them for, because I think that men get applauded for doing the bare minimum. But also, you don't just want to get into a romantic relationship with someone who's nice. A romantic relationship is so much more than that. You know, you want to have the same sense of humor. You want there to be sexual attraction between you guys. You want to have a romantic connection with them. And you aren't just going to have a romantic connection with someone who's nice to you. It doesn't really work like that. So much more goes into a romantic relationship, which I think a lot of pick-me's and nice guys just fail to grasp that concept. And men thinking that basic social expectations are a currency for sex really reminds me of a tweet that I saw ages ago, which still rings true, girls. And it's basically how all men benefit from the violence of other men, because even if you aren't being violent yourself, you're seen as one of the good ones. And I think that those types of men clearly take advantage of being seen as one of the good ones. And obviously we need to take into consideration that men have been socialized this way. I'm not going to get too into this because I'm not saying anything new or groundbreaking, but men have been socialized in a way where they really value sex and romantic relationships with women and sexual relationships with women, because they've been taught that lots of sex equals masculinity, masculinity is good, femininity is bad. Therefore, if you aren't having sex, you are less of a man. But what I definitely find the most worrying thing about pick me boys and nice guy syndrome is how these types of characters are so susceptible to incel radicalization. So now I want to talk about incels, and I know what you guys are thinking. This has escalated very quickly. How did we go from talking about Hugo from Love Island to incel radicalization? The Hugo from Love Island to incel radicalization pipeline. But I do think that incels and extreme misogyny is something that we need to talk about, because I do think that young boys and young men, especially pick-me's and nice guys, are particularly susceptible to incel radicalization, with how easy easily they can access the internet. A lot of mass shooters have been linked to incel pages and forums, most recently one in Portsmouth. So clearly this movement isn't just a tiny group of men in their parents' basement wearing Y-fronts complaining online about how all women are shallow sluts. Clearly there are real life repercussions to this. Incel is short for involuntary celibate, which basically means you want to get laid but you can't. It was coined in the mid-90s by a young woman named Alana, who started a website/blog called Alana's Involuntary Celibacy Project, where she documented her dating struggles and still being a virgin in her mid-20s. And she had started a mailing list where a small group of men and women would share their struggles of being involuntarily celibate. It was a very small but kind and supportive community, and Alana ended up drifting from the community a few years later when she actually started having some success in her dating life. And now the incel community is almost completely unrecognizable from its origins. Obviously, I am going to say, because I know I'm going to get loads of comments about it, there are incel communities which do focus on people just being involuntarily celibate and aren't super misogynistic. But we can't ignore that a majority of incel communities and forums and pages and websites are dedicated to being violently anti-feminist and misogynistic. The incel community is now dominated by straight white men. As I said earlier, it's very anti-feminist, and rather than discussing solutions to these lonely men's dating problems, they actually say that men are the oppressed victims in society and not women. And your first step in joining the incel movement is taking the red pill, which is a Matrix reference. I actually watched the Matrix the other day. It was really camp, which basically means shifting your perspective and realizing that the world is not what you thought it was. And once incels have metaphorically taken the red pill, they realize that men are actually victims of sexism and not women, and that male privilege is actually a myth created by feminism. Feminism is actually an evil movement which promotes the dominance of women over men, and this man-hating world is referred to as a gynocracy, and it is designed to keep men at the bottom of the pile, all in the name of women's rights. And I think the reason why this worldview is so appealing to a lot of men is because they don't actually have to take any responsibility for anything. Nothing is their fault. It's all women's fault. And these incels will take feminist talking points and twist them to fit their anti-feminist narrative. They say that any form of feminism is a criticism of men and how men then aren't allowed to be proudly masculine anymore. And don't get me wrong, there definitely are a lot of problems which do affect men. For example, the male suicide rate is 3 times of the women's suicide rate. But rather than focusing their attention on the men who are currently suffering, they put all of their energy into vilifying feminism and vilifying women's only spaces by accusing them of being sexist. A majority of incels believe in the 80-20 theory, that the top 20% of attractive men enjoy 80% of the sex in society, because 80% of women only want to have sex with that top 20% of men, and that women have almost all of the control in the sexual marketplace, and that looks are everything. Looks always overpower personality. Therefore, if you are unattractive, then all hope is lost. And of course, as most of us know, this theory can very easily be disproved, because there are loads of men out there who aren't, you know, the top 20% of society's most attractive, but they have girlfriends and wives and kids. But incels have a counter argument to this, and it's called like the beta cuck argument, where basically they believe that when women are in their young years, they will have sex with that top 20% of attractive men. But when they get older, they will settle with someone who is unattractive but has money, so they can use them for financial stability. So they basically decide to settle down with a less attractive but financially stable man. Incels incels look down on these men. They call them beta cucks. So as you guys can probably tell, physical attractiveness is almost core to incel ideology. All incels blame their physical looks for the reason that they can't get laid, to the point where there's actually different categories based on what your physical shortcomings are. So there are height cells, ginger cells, and bald cells, which I think is pretty self-explanatory. There's also skull cells, which are incels who have poor bone structure, and wrist cells, which is incels who have a wrist circumference of 6.5 inches or less. And although a majority of incels are white, there are non-white incels who are characterized by racist stereotypes. So I just want to apologize in advance. I don't want to be saying this stuff on my channel. It's not nice. They use terms such as black cell, curry cell, rice cell, and ethnicell. But these terms are far more often used by white incels to describe men of color, because a lot of incels do believe that men of color are inferior to them, and that is further illustrated by how enraged a lot of white incels get about white women dating non-white men. And yes, even though I did say earlier that incels aren't these super weird guys who are hiding in their parents' basements, in their Y-fronts, sitting on their computer with their snotty noses, eating takeaways, going on about how women are all whores, but I definitely think that a lot of incels, although they are normal people, are outcasts. They're clearly very lonely. I mean, they clearly don't have a girlfriend, and a lot of them don't really have any friends in real life either. So I think that the incel movement and these incel forums and pages is seen as a community by a lot of these people, and it gives them sort of a sense of belonging. And the incel community is very clearly a man-only space. Despite the term being coined by a woman, it's a very commonly held belief amongst incels that it is impossible for a woman to be an incel, because according to them, no matter how unattractive a woman is, she will always find someone who wants to sleep with her. I'm not going to dive too deep into this, but the incel movement does have connections with the alt-right and white supremacy. Laura Bates talks more about this in the book, so make sure you guys go and pick this up if you want to know more. But to put it very simply, the alt-right is a movement that believe that their whiteness is under attack by multiculturalism, and that they are actually the victims of oppression and not ethnic minorities. And as you guys can see, there are a lot of similarities and a lot of crossover between incels and the alt-right. Both of them believe that feminism is cancer. Alt-right ideology seems to manifest itself in incel communities, with how incels believe that men of color are inferior to them. And when it comes to solutions to their involuntary celibacy, this is where incels can become divided. Some incels do believe that you can almost ascend out of your involuntary celibacy, and you can do this by improving your looks, and this is called looks maxing. And there are forums dedicated to incels posting pictures of themselves and asking for advice, and the responses can really range. There are people responding, giving them genuine advice and pep talks and grooming tips, and others will mock them and tell them that there's no hope and that they should just give up. Some incels decide to join the gym, and these people are called gym cells. Others do mewing, which is like a jaw exercise, and others are willing to get plastic surgery, skull implants, and even penis stretching. But a lot of incels who truly believe that all hope is lost and that there's absolutely no solutions to their involuntary celibacy will refer to themselves as black pillars or black pills, who believe that they're so physically unattractive that they will never find a partner and they will forever be involuntary celibate. They hate good-looking men, Chads, they hate good-looking women, Stacys, and they especially hate average-looking women who can get laid, Beckys. They often discuss suicide at length, and some will even encourage each other to commit suicide. And this side of the incel community has so much vitriol towards women to the point of dehumanizing them. They will refer to them as femoids. From an incel's perspective, women have all control in the sexual marketplace. Women women decide whether men have sex or not. And incels believe that this causes their suffering. Therefore, the women's liberation movement is the root to all male suffering. And I find what's so ridiculous about this is that incels clearly aren't mad at women having sex because they want women to have sex with them. They're just mad at who women are choosing to have sex with. So no matter how high or low your body count is, if you aren't having sex with an incel, you're gonna be considered a shallow slut. And obviously this is the more extreme side of the incel community, but a lot of these incels will dehumanize these women to justify their very twisted beliefs, such as legalizing rape, legalizing sex slavery, and committing massacres against women and girls. Laura Bates goes really into detail with the types of forums and posts that she found, and honestly, it is really, really disturbing. And I know some of you guys may be thinking, how do men even end up on incel communities? And honestly, I think that a majority of men stumble upon incel forums on accident. I think that some men and boys will Google, you know, dating advice and how to improve your looks. And topics like this are such common talking points amongst incels that it's almost inevitable that you're going to stumble upon something. And although a lot of academics who study incels do believe that a majority of young boys who stumble upon these forums will eventually grow out of it, I don't think that we can just ignore the men and boys who don't grow out of it. Also, the whole notion of, oh, it's fine, they'll just grow out of it, it's just bizarre to me, because I find it a little bit crazy that being part of a misogynistic community with links to white supremacy and the alt-right is seen as just a phase which some boys will grow out of. The fact that it's seen as like something which is acceptable and just like a phase is just absolutely shocking to me, and becomes so desensitized to women being completely dehumanized on these incel forums that all of these misogynistic fantasies start becoming more and more appealing to them. And I know that black pill incels are very much on the extreme end of things. But we also need to remember that the incel community and just the internet in general has bred so many other misogynistic groups, such as men's rights activists, pickup artists, and just casual misogyny on the internet in general. One example is men choosing to only highlight women who falsely accuse men of rape and not highlighting men who actually rape women, which I find really weird, because as a man, you're actually far more likely to be raped by another man than to be falsely accused of rape by a woman. And despite incel radicalization being very much on the extreme end of things, there are real world repercussions to incel radicalization, mostly in the form of mass shootings. In the past 10 years, over 100 people, mostly women, have been murdered by men linked to incel forums, communities, pages, etc. And I know that seems like a small number, but if you think about how seriously this country takes Islam radicalization and how this is just not handled with the same seriousness. But just to close this segment of the video, I want to talk about Elliot Rodger. He committed the 2014 Isla Vista shootings, where 7 people died, 14 people were injured, and he ended up turning the gun on himself. And he ended up basically becoming a martyr to the incel community. Incels who committed shootings after him would reference him in their suicide notes and memoirs. Elliot Rodger was extremely misogynistic. He clearly had a lot of hatred towards women. But I think that he's also a perfect example of how deluded incels can be, because, you know, I'm not going to sit here and call Elliot Rodger hot, because I think that there's enough teenage girls calling mass murderers hot on the internet. I don't want to join in with that. But he wasn't bad looking at all. It really just proves how deep this thing is, like how deep they can spiral into it and how deluded they are and how clearly they just aren't really with reality. It wasn't Elliot Rodger's looks which made women not want to date him. It was his vile personality. But yeah, that's the end of this video. I hope that you guys enjoyed this. I know that my videos seem to end quite abruptly and I never really have a good conclusion. And I know that escalated very quickly. I went from talking about Love Island to talking about incels, but I do think that it is important to talk about the more extreme end of misogyny, because even though it's small, it's still there, and there's still real world repercussions to this. And men who are just casually misogynistic, it can very quickly spiral into extreme misogyny, especially with the use of the internet and access to all of these forums and all of these really twisted, horrible fantasies and ideologies. But yeah, I hope that you guys enjoyed this video, and if you did, give it a thumbs up, and I will see you guys soon for a new video. Bye.